My name is David Moore. I'm an Associate Director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies and a professor at BYU Law School. Grateful for your attendance and for the tone that's been with us since our opening session. I've appreciated the humility and conviction and earnestness with which we're approaching these topics. I've been looking forward to this session. We have a unique format. We have 4 panelists, and they represent 2 pairs of partnerships, interfaith partnerships that have been formed in Boston and here in Utah. And so we'll get to hear about their experiences in actually forming, participating, operating interfaith partnerships, and learn from what they've learned. We're a little short on time, but hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end, so I hope you'll be thinking about things you might want to ask our panelists. Let me introduce them very briefly. Their bios are available online on the full program. We'll hear first from Reverend Mark Scott, an associate pastor of the Azusa Christian community in Boston. We'll then turn to Kisha Sogunro, who is Assistant Director of Communications in the North American Northeast area of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We'll hear about their partnership. We'll then turn to Rob Howell, who is Senior Manager of Interfaith Relations at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then turn to Alex Shapiro, who is Executive Director of the United Jewish Federation of Utah. Elder Scott.
Thank you all very much. And since you introduced myself, my friend Kisha, which was great. We're here with our partners from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Sent multiple trucks from Salt Lake City, Utah to bless Massachusetts with an abundance of food.
We're in the process of loading 2,000 packages of food with the turkey and 25 pounds of assorted food for the holidays for the poor. Family meal for, I would say, at least 12 people with leftovers.
And this was very well organized, so it has gone very quickly today.
People from all faiths come together. We have young people, older people, a lot of volunteers. It's been a great day.
We're so grateful for the opportunity we have to work with Reverend and Dr. Rivers. They have such a huge influence with a lot of different community organizations in and around Boston.
Incredible group of people who have worked together with the Mormon Church to help distribute throughout the city of Boston.
There are so many organizations that I had never heard of. They do amazing things with youth, with women, with children.
I think probably 250 organizations. People from everywhere, from Plymouth to Newburyport, all over Massachusetts, Worcester, Framingham, Newton, Brookline, all the way into Boston.
So happy to see so many people here just helping out, especially on a Saturday cold morning.
I work in the schools. I'm a detective. I work in the schools for the Boston Police Department to get food out to some of the kids that are in the Boston public schools, help them have a good Thanksgiving. Their bellies aren't full and their brains probably are not full.
Reverend Dr. Veronica Lewis. I'm affiliated with Azusa Community Christian Church. We're expecting to distribute 2,000 turkeys with commodities.
I am Pastor Reba Danastor. We're getting food to serve those that are disabled. We will be able to serve at least 250 families.
I am Pastor Tanya Ward. I'm from West Springfield, Massachusetts. It is my goal to be able to serve at least 300.
I work for Mothers for Justice and Equality, and we're planning to serve about 50 families today.
I'm Jenny Bloom, and I sing in the choir with Annie. We actually meet here in the building. When I realized this service project was going to happen, I said, I'm going to hand out flyers. So I handed out flyers, and Annie decided to join us.
Today was a great opportunity for me to be able to help others, and I jumped at the chance to be able to come.
We are the Transformational Prison Project, right? And for me, this is a meaningful moment
because not even less than 2 years ago, some of us were serving life in prison for crimes we committed in these same neighborhoods, and now we partner with police, partner with community to make our communities better and do better work for our communities. For me, this is like living amends. If we would have had this type of work done to us when we was the age that his children are, then we wouldn't have been in prison for 28 years, 10 years. None of that would never happen.
With the pandemic, a lot of the youth that we work with actually have lost family members.
One of the students at the school was stealing food. When I met with the student, I found out that her mother was in the hospital with COVID and her father had died from COVID. She was left at 14 years old in the house trying to make sure the rest of the siblings got fed. This is what this helps us do. It allows us to say, you don't have to steal it. We want to give it to you.
Today is my daughter's birthday. She's turned 7, and she's going to actually go with me, spending some part of her birthday here, helping other families to make sure that they have a good day on Thursday.
There are people out there who are less fortunate, who don't have what they need. I want to make sure that since I am capable to supply what they may need.
This is the way we are here in the United States. Giving, and thanks God for this life and for this country.
I think it starts with being thankful. And if we can use that energy to keep it going year round, because our poor are far, far too poor.
I thought I was going to have a big enough truck, and I'm packed to the gills. So
There's people that care about each other, and that, there's still hope.
So this is a great thing, great day.
Jesus Christ provided the best example of how to love and serve others. And to see so many of us come together, that's the way we keep that promise.
We are mandated to help.
Jesus told us to go out into the highways, the hedges, and he told us to feed the hungry.
Church buildings are expecting the people to come, but the reality is you have to go, Yeah, Jesus said go. Go therefore, so we have to go out, yeah. This is Jesus' work. That's the only way I can say it. He would do the same thing.
Take it out. Got it. So the...
Don't. The U.S. government will literally buy them for you. If
Is that YouTube? Right. Always going on to the next one. The video tells a lot of what it was we were able to work on together. I just want to first take a step back and talk about some of the history that brought us to that point. I am the associate pastor of a very tiny Black Pentecostal church in Boston, the Azusa Christian community. And I won't go on and on because I don't have time to go on and on, but Jesus gives this pretty simple directive, follow me. And so in our endeavor, our ongoing endeavor to struggle to stay in step with him and to follow him, we end up in a neighborhood, Four Corners, in the city of Boston, in the Dorchester area, that is very poor, very young, very Black, and had a lot of violence. So we heard his inaugural address to bring good tidings to the lowly, to preach good news to the poor. And so we were pursuing that as a goal. And the poor ended up being young Black men and boys in a lot of trouble and caught up in a lot of violence. And so one of those young men helped in addressing 10 points, a 10-point plan for what churches can do to overcome violence. And so the 10-point plan was written, you heard Pastor Rivers' name mentioned, it was written in his kitchen with this young man who was very deeply involved, but he became a friend. So friendship is a theme that runs through this morning. He became a friend, he helped write that 10-point plan. So that was one of the things that came out of the Azusa Christian community. Another thing that came out of the Azusa Christian community was the Seymour Institute. And the Seymour Institute is a study group, a policy group that works on Black church policy issues and issues that face our society, particularly again with the emphasis on the poor. And it's because of the work of the Seymour Institute that we began to develop a friendship with the LDS. And that's where those relationships began to form. And so that friendship and those relationships have just deepened and deepened and deepened over time. It's really why I'm here now today. The friendship and the interest in the poor meant, can we get food? This is one, I work in public health and we talk about social determinants of health. So having food is going to determine how healthy you are. So the church, LDS, approached us and said, can we help you provide food so that it can be distributed to people who are in need in the Boston area? So that church, Azusa, that I mentioned, actually had one of its early beginnings ministry being around food, but it wasn't something we were really doing at the moment. We would do it here and there, we'd help out, but we didn't have a real serious formalized food insecurity program, a food distribution program, but that's what our friends were interested in. So we said, all right, well, let's work on that. So part of the outcome of that was the church came and said, listen, we can provide the food. And then they said, 2,000 turkeys, how about that? Let's do 2,000 turkeys. So I'm like, 2,000 turkeys, right? I don't know how am I going to possibly move 2,000 turkeys. I told you we're a tiny Black Pentecostal church. That's not. So, but what I have is friends. And so all the people, and there are many more that you saw in that video, are friends. And they have friends that would need a turkey. And then we said, well, let's do the trimmings too. So all of those boxes that you saw, that was the trimmings, right? So all I did was took the gesture of my friend and turned and reached out to a bunch of other friends and said, can we move 2,000 turkeys? And I'm going to turn it over to Kisha to sort of take it from here. The last thing I just want to say is it has been such a pleasure and a joy to work with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on this effort. You saw all of those folks moving around. That was organized by Just Serve. And the Lord blessed us in New England in November with a day that wasn't too cool and wasn't too hot. In November in New England, it could have been 75 degrees or it could have been 7 degrees. And so we had a day that was just right for the work that we needed to do. But people came from all around the area and helped take those pallets off of those trucks, pack those boxes, put the turkeys in, and then get it out through a friendship network. That friendship network still exists. It's gotten stronger. We're already putting in order for Thanksgiving 2022, and we're also working on being able to do something during the months in between now and November. So there were 11 church communities that were part of this friendship network, and then actually another 18 that are community serving organizations that were a part of it. And that's how we were able to share, we call it giving thanks at Thanksgiving by sharing turkeys with families in need. So with that, I'll stop and give it to Kisha.
Thank you. So what Reverend Scott did not mention is that it's friendship and trust, because in August of last year, we just met. So we had to mobilize and execute what you saw on that video in under like a little over 60 days. And what you do not also realize in the video is that we were working through 3 different sites. You try to take a semi-truck, and I'm from Northern Virginia, so I'm just learning the small streets of Boston to navigate that. We had a lot of fun in our meetings, I'll tell you that. But as Elder Scott said, and Reverend Scott said, is that we started that friendship in August, and then we put together a plan where we talked every Sunday to execute that and bring in more people to help us with that Thanksgiving giveaway. We also had partners with Catholic Charities that helped out, and we also did some contributions there. But what's so significant about this is that you know how you send out something early in August and you want to email, you want it returned back? I think you were modest in your list. It was over 18, nonprofits and of the churches, because we got a slow response initially, but as we got closer to the date, things just start happening out of the woodwork with people wanting to participate and wanting to get involved. And I would say what makes this so special is that folks took ownership. This wasn't something that the church came into a community and said, this is what you need to do. No, we listened. In August, when the church came, members of our church met with the Azusa Christian Community Church leaders. We sat for maybe 2 days, and we listened to the different stories and different things that were happening in the community as regards to violence, food insecurities, and just different things that were happening. And out of that 2 days, I think from there we got together and said, okay, what can we do now? What type of impact that we absolutely can do now? What makes that video special is that while we have nonprofits and different churches that were involved, we also had government. We also had police officers that were there helping. And at this point in time in our society, sometimes that kind of help is not welcomed. But what you saw was everyone was together for a common purpose. And that's why it was so successful. And so I also need to be transparent. My other hat that I wear, I work in local government in Northern Virginia. And so I know about boots on the ground and grassroots organizing, having to mobilize. And simply, one organization cannot do it all. You have to pull together. You have to work together because everyone can contribute something. I think earlier this morning, Elizabeth Clark said it best when she said, if you care about people, you want to address their concerns and challenges. And that's what you saw that happen. I would say, a week before Thanksgiving, a few days before Thanksgiving? Yeah, and it was fabulous. I was just so surprised at how giving everyone was. Something of that magnitude, you can get some crankiness because so much is going on in traffic. We didn't have any of that. Actually, it was kind of like a celebration or so, just to help people, because with the pandemic, it was so much food insecurity, and we heard so many hard stories. So it was so important that we had fun in this planning. I would say another important element is that what you saw in the video was several ministers and pastors. We have built a relationship over this period of time to be reciprocal, to make sure we care about what they're doing in the community. This is not something that we just went in and said you had to do. We are following what they're doing and their ministries and how impactful they are to the Boston community. So we're excited. As Reverend Scott said, yes, we are crazy enough to do this again, but we have put in place more time to organize and mobilize. We are doing the turkeys, but we're going to mix in some chickens. Everyone has different dietary needs. We understand different dietary needs, and we're excited. And we're looking to build a sustainable partnership. That's so key, sustainable, because you don't want to be transactionary. Sustainable to let the citizens of Boston and our church friends know that we're here and we have your back, and this is going to be a long partnership that we can make impact in those communities. So now I turn it over to the moderator.
Oh, wow. These two over here is a prime example of why I love what I do. In the church communication department with our assignment with Interfaith Relations, we get to hear these kinds of stories and be a part of them throughout the world. And so thank you, Elder Scott and Kisha, for what you're doing and what you're exemplifying. There are stories from around the world, but today I'm here in my hat with, in Salt Lake. We've had a fun thing we've been doing for probably, what, 10 years? Alex, is your mic on? Turn your mic on.
Yes.
No, see?
Yes, Rob, that's correct.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about what we began 10 years ago, but I thought maybe, Alex, you should tell them a little bit more about Jewish Federation first, and then let's just talk about how we started this. Is that okay?
Sure. Well, I'm Alex Shapiro, and I'm the Executive Director of the United Jewish Federation of Utah. But before I tell you just a little bit about what that is, I feel that based on most of our crowd today, I should share a little bit about myself. People always ask me, where am I from? And I give them the same answer, and that is my twin 26-year-old sons are fourth-generation Jewish Utahns. So when you talk about multi-generational around these parts, usually not us guys. So my family's had some pretty good staying power here. Right on. So I run an agency here called the United Jewish Federation of Utah, which is part of a national system called the Jewish Federations of North America. And there's about 165 of these agencies around the United States in all big cities, small states, etc. And we are not a religious agency per se. We're of course founded on Jewish ethics, culture, tradition, values. But our focus is to care for our own Jewish community, the people and the agencies that are a part of it, and Jewish communities around the world as well. So we do that by bringing our broad community together, people who belong to this synagogue or that synagogue, or take advantage of Jewish social services or community center work or schools or whatever, and we just stand in the center and we gather, and we ultimately raise money in order to make that impact. You know, part of what we do is try to be a good partner throughout the broad community, and that's how Rob and I hooked up, you know, more than 10 years ago. And it's important to me, growing up here, you know, I'm part of the fabric of this great state we call home. I grew up with only friends in the LDS church. I mean, if there were 3 or 4 Jewish kids in my school, that was it. So, you know, I have deep roots and deep affection for this place I call home. So it was easy to create this relationship many years ago.
You can see why we connected when you understand that I grew up outside of Utah mostly and was one of the 3 or 4 Latter-day Saint students at each of my schools. But we've connected very quickly and became friends. I want to say, yeah, it was a little over 10 years ago when Alex came to me and said, you know, we need to start a dialogue group here in Salt Lake City with members of the Jewish community, members of the Latter-day Saint community, just to get to understand one another and understand each other's perspectives on different things that affect the community, but mostly just to get to know each other and to work together and find ways to collaborate that make sense. So, and these kinds of things, just in my hat now in the Church Communication Department with Interfaith Relations, happen all over the country and all over the world. But this one's dear because I got to be a part of it every month for 10 plus years going on, and hopefully that continues as long as he's willing to put up with us. But we, let me just tell you how we started. We started with format, and okay, what are we going to do? Every other month, you host it at the JCC. We'll host it here at church headquarters in the Joseph Smith building. We'll have lunch together. We'll invite a group of friends. We'll group about 10 on each side, and just have a meal together and talk about a particular, we'll pick a topic and we'll discuss it from both perspectives. So that was an easy decision to make on format. The very first real decision we had to make was, okay, how do we bless the food? And I told him, hey,
usually we just hurry and eat.
Right. So I just told him, we're fine with your prayer over the food. We'll say amen and we're covered. But do you remember what you told me?
I believe I said, when we're in your house, you will do the prayer, and when we host, we'll share.
So that's what we've been doing. And it's been a beautiful thing. We've been able to share each other's traditions during high holidays and other holidays throughout the year. I keep trying to tell my boss that we should honor all holidays of every religion, and I'll come in a couple times a month and call it good. And one of the traditions that we've enjoyed together is inviting our friends from the Jewish Dialogue to the Christmas concert with the Tabernacle Choir every year. So lots of fun things we do together, but I'll share one quick story. A few years ago, as many of you will recall, President Nelson re-emphasized the correct name of the church being the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That we weren't Mormons, that we were Latter-day Saints, that we believe in the Book of Mormon, etc. And so this dialogue group's been going on for 6+ years at the time. And so I came in to let them know that we would no longer have a Mormon-Jewish dialogue. And immediately, all the Latter-day Saints side got up in arms and were freaking out that, what do you mean? I love this. We look forward to this every month. We can't discontinue this. And all of our Jewish friends said, because it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so we continue. But we could talk about some of the different topics. We can talk about some of the different experiences we've had together. But there's been some times when, and I'll say they're not just all softball topics. Some of them are, organization of the church. Well, what does it mean when we have a missionary gets his call? I shared a video of when my own daughter was opening her mission call, and that was a tender moment with everybody in the room. But we've shared each other's special times together, and we really, it's just become friends. And after a while, we threatened to stop picking a topic and just see how long people would talk, and then it would be over before we even had a topic to address. But we usually pick a topic on some form or another, and they're not all easy topics, but we are able to talk openly because we're friends.
Okay, before we got to serious topics, there were, one main group dynamic that we had to get over. We Jews tend to talk fast and talk over each other without care for where the other might be in a sentence. On the other hand, our LDS friends were patient, raising their hands, waiting their turn. The balance of conversation was very uneven in those early days. But I'll say, kidding aside, we didn't do this to preach about each other's faith, to attempt to change anybody's mind about what they believe or how they practice. We did it to build friendships, which seems to be the key word of the day. But in a way that I was sitting in here for the prior session, and one of the speakers was talking about building trust, but in a way to build trust among each other so that we could have easy and difficult conversations. So to Rob's point, we had a lot of simple topics, trying to feel out where we each are in our faith journeys, in our home journeys, in our community journeys, etc. But we addressed some more sensitive topics, be around social issues, social justice, things like that. We talked about posthumous baptism, which could be a challenge depending on who you are, especially as it concerns the baptism posthumously of Holocaust survivors, right? So we were able to tackle these subjects with respect and with friendship and with a trust that we could get through these conversations together. And one quick example, my memory might be a little hazy on exactly to the detail, but a couple years ago during election season in a local House race, the only Jewish legislator in our state legislature was running for re-election again. And her opponent in her area on a Saturday made a statement or made a Facebook post, and he was of the LDS faith, and he slightly twisted a bit of scripture, I think, from the Book of Mormon, that when he posted it, it came out with a little bit of an anti-Semitic bent. It made it feel like he should be the one to be elected because. So this caused a little bit of stir, and this was on a Sunday morning when we discovered this. So on a Sunday, I reached out to my pal Rob, who likely was doing other things that morning, And it wasn't too long, but an hour or so before he returned my message, and together we worked on what we might do next. So that example is a result of the type of relationship that this little dialogue friendship that we've built is.
It's been a huge blessing to me, to my family, to all of us that get to be a part of this dialogue group every other month. And in fact, our next meeting is next Tuesday out at the Humanitarian Center. We're going to walk through. If you ever want a good tour of the Welfare Square, Alex can do the tour for us.
I can do it walking backwards too.
So anyway, with that, we're honored to be here with you to share a little bit of our journey and our friendship with you, and we certainly want to leave time for questions.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with your partnerships. We do have some time, so, and Shannon has a microphone, and we have one on the other side as well. So if you have a question you'd like to present to our panelists, please raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. Aaron?
I have a question that was asked of me after the last panel that I think applies here. As you're talking about both teams, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, how much time to take first to get to know each other? Like how do you know when you're to the point where you can start tackling something difficult or figuring out how to drive through the narrow streets of Boston together?
I pick up on something that Kisha really kind of reminded me of. When they came to Boston, it was to listen, right? So it gave us a chance. We actually spent a couple of days together, right? And all day, right? And into the evening. So I think there was a early on core set of relationships that developed for us pretty quickly, and then we had to get into like nitty-gritty work, and I think Kisha mentioned this too. That was, kind of a formal meeting every week, and then some interaction throughout the week. So I think the short time frame actually helped us because it gave us some intensity and frequency of meeting together, but that really began over food and over conversation, over sharing stories. I think that's a big theme here this morning. A lot of sharing the stories and a lot of listening. And so I think that was kind of the way that flowed for us.
When I realized that we had truly formed a friendship, is that Reverend Scott's a pretty big deal in Boston. And when he initially sent out the email distribution that we have these 2,000 turkeys, is anyone interested? We're partnering. When I saw that we were copied on that email, those are significant relationships that he has built over time, years of working in government at the national and local level. And to see your name copied on the email, we all have that feeling. We know that sometimes we will send correspondence independently and ask the question rather than copy a person on the email to find out what's going on. But when Reverend Scott copied us on that email, no, you are our true partner. This is real. This is going to happen. And that's what I guess cemented for me that we're really going to do this and you trust us with your core partnerships. And that you know that we're going to do what we said we're going to do. And so that is what really struck to me, that we had a friendship and you trusted us to be able to execute.
I think we were lucky because we weren't born of crisis or the need to solve, other than build relationships. So we had the benefit of time, right? And it was clear quickly on, not too many months in, that because of the ease of doing this and the comfort that we all felt in the room, that friendships developed quickly and organically, and and deepened over time. So I think we were lucky that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Alex mentioned he's grown up around Latter-day Saints, generational, right? But many of the Jewish community and those in our dialogue group were transplanted from Chicago or from New York or from California or from elsewhere where they may not have had as much interaction. So there was a little bit of time, but he saw the comfort level here, or they saw the comfort level here, so that trust was easy to grow up. For myself, I don't remember the specific time, but I remember one time walking into one of the events, either at the JCC or maybe it was Shabbat services, and I didn't need to have anybody from my department with me or other Latter-day Saints with me. I was just there with my brothers and sisters, just by myself, and I felt welcome, I felt loved, I felt appreciated, respected. I was just part of the group. And I remember that feeling coming home to my wife. It's like, hey, I can go there anytime I want and just show up and knock on the door and they're going to let me in.
The hazing you went through, though, was horrible.
Is it over yet? I think it's still happening.
Let me follow up on that. Well, we have some other questions, so if we could get microphones here and to the back. While we're doing that, let me just ask, it sounds like, Kisha, you reached out to Reverend Scott and initiated this. Alex, you reached out to Rob. What motivated that? And sort of how those of you on the receiving end, Elder Scott and Rob, how did you feel to receive that invitation? What was your response?
Well, Reverend Scott said it best. We didn't have time on our side, so we had to execute. So it was after our initial meeting, 2 days, full-scale meetings with our church leadership, all of us flying to Boston. The plan was for Reverend Scott and I to coordinate weekly of how we're going to execute. And so our conversations every Sunday afternoon after church, talking about family, of course, and then jumping into the details of logistics and planning, that's what, made it work. I think sometimes too much time can be kind of the enemy because you kind of get in your own head and start thinking stuff. But we didn't have time. So we had to trust each other, or I don't know, something else was going to happen.
For me, it was interesting. I came into this role I have now about 12 years ago from a whole nother world of influence. And as I dipped my toes in and I looked at the makeup of our community when I was growing up, it was local, it was stationary, everybody knew everyone, and now we all know, at least those of us who live here, the amount of growth that our state has had over the years, and that certainly had its effect on the Jewish community as well. So people from all over the country moving here for all kinds of great things that this state has to offer. But I understood in that moment that this group of mine didn't have the same benefit of understanding maybe as much as, definitely not as much as I did, who the LDS church was and who the members of this church were, and all the good that happens and takes place locally and around the world that I was able to learn and experience. And I just felt I had an obligation to make that available. So that's from where really I think for me the concept was born a little bit.
And we had a relationship with his predecessor in his current role, and so it was a natural introduction. But as we got to know each other quickly, and then his idea about having the dialogue group, there's certainly connections we make beyond the dialogue group all the time. So
I remember fairly well that 2-day meeting in August, and I took a couple of days off of work to be able to be fully vested in being there. I just had a really strong sense that it was just the right thing to do. So the short answer to your question is when the outreach happened, for me it was a full-on embrace of it, right? And I'm thinking about, well, why? Because there were seeds that have been planted for me for many years. So I mentioned the Seymour Institute on purpose because I knew that my colleagues, the leaders of my church, were in were back and forth in dialogue. They were coming out here to Utah and visiting. There were other visits that happened earlier, so I knew that there had been this dialogue that had been going on. But then there's one of the men that you see in the video who is talking. He's a colleague of mine. He's a minister in Boston, but he wasn't always a minister. He would have been involved in, he has a powerful testimony about going from being deeply involved in being a part of, harmed by, and then harmful in terms of violence in the city. And he told a story about one of his friends had been killed in a homicide. He was grieving that. It was night. It was the evening time. He's in the back of Boston. It's all kind of old housing, triple deckers. He's in the back, and a couple of missionaries came and walked up to the back of the house and said hello, right? Spoke to him, and he's like, "Not now, fellas," right? So they left, right? But the courage that they exhibited to walk up to him, they wouldn't have known all that was going on and anything, but just to go and say that's a seed being planted. And I had another colleague, a whole other kind of job, actually in the DC area, and she was a member of the LDS. And so we would have conversations because we were colleagues. And she grew up Catholic and converted. And I was like, well, why? Why did you do that, right? She said it was because of the light, right? And so that conversation and that relationship and her experience of the church as being an experience of light, there's another seed being planted, right? So there were all these things happening so that when the gesture was made, I was just in a position to be able to embrace that, and then we got to work, right? And it only got reinforced over and over again. So I guess that would be the nurturing of the seed that was planted.
Can I add on to that, Dave? Just real quickly, Elder Scott talked about something very, very important and very deeply meaningful to me, and a great blessing in my life. Anybody who gets involved in any kind of interfaith thing, formally, most people are doing what they don't even realize. They're just being friendly, they're just being kind, they're just being good people. But we get the question a lot, why are you friends? Why is Alex here today at this predominantly Latter-day Saint gathering? Why is Elder Scott traveling out here from Boston to talk at this event? Why are you friends? And the world doesn't want us to be. They teach us that we should be divisive, that if we have one belief and somebody has another belief, that's a battleground. And what you find quickly, if you open your heart and open your mouth just to speak with someone, you learn the fundamental truth that we teach in the Church of Jesus Christ, and other faiths teach it too, that we are children of God. And therefore we are sisters and brothers, first and foremost. And so the blessing for me in my life, as I've gotten to be more acquainted with my Jewish friends, or my Muslim friends, or my Catholic friends, or my Episcopalian friends, or Sikh friends, or whatever religion or background that they come from, it enriches my life, it deepens my relationship with my Father in heaven, and hopefully it does likewise for them. But the world teaches and preaches that we should not be friends, that we shouldn't be collaborating, that we shouldn't be connected. And this is just an example of why that's false. Because if we did so, and if we listened to the way the world wants us to act, we wouldn't enjoy these friendships, we wouldn't be enriched and blessed the way we are.
Thank you. We have some questions here. So let's take all three questions. I saw 3 hands earlier, so let's take all 3 questions and allow the panelists to respond. Please. Go ahead, up at the top.
Hi, So this, I guess, goes to what you just discussed about these points of division and conflict, and often how the world presents religions in opposition to each other. But of course, there are points of opposition and conflict. And having been involved a little bit in interfaith communities, actually Jewish and Muslim, one of the things those communities struggle with is that it's easy to get together and say, oh, you like hummus, we like hummus, right? You celebrate this holiday, we celebrate this holiday. It's all wonderful and good, right? Up until you address points of conflict or contention. Obviously in Jewish and Muslim communities, that's often something like Israel-Palestine. Thankfully for the Mormons and the Jews, this is not a thing that comes up. Although go back into the 80s or come to our panel next, we might talk a little about there was some conflict in Jerusalem a few decades back. So how do you negotiate those moments of conflict when they arise in your communities? I am speaking to the Jewish and Muslim community here and those people on the panel, but it's also true, I'm sure, when it comes into the context of the LDS Church and engaging with Christian denominations as well.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I have a quick, passionate response to that, and that is, you're right. There are those types of conflict that exists between people, but we have a wonderful relationship with the Muslim community here in the area, and what we choose to do, and not that we always agree on the paths that we choose to take, but we make the conscious decision to bond around our commonalities, because there's so much more that connects us and brings us together than divides us. And that's simply our focus, and it's simply the base from which we work.
Thank you. Other questions, please here and then down in front.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your examples today. My question for you is, for both of the groups here, is how do you broaden your scope? Reverend Scott, it sounds like you sent out an amazing email with a bunch of friends. My question is, were they all Christian or maybe Abrahamic or people of the book? How do we include more religious or spiritual minorities in these kinds of efforts? And Rob and Alex, how do you, or are there plans to broaden the scope of your dialogue and include more folks so that we keep capturing a larger audience in this work that we're working on?
And let's take this last question here in front. Get you the microphone and then have our responses, please.
My question travels along the same lines as the last. What is the amplification, the ripple effect of what you are doing and what you might plan to do? One small suggestion, personal, was as I grew up in Portland, Oregon, I was 1 out of 12 and about 3,000 kids in high school. And
Beaverton, right here, Beaverton.
Beaverton, Portland, southeast, Mount Tabor. Anyway, my experience as a youth in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I still have trouble doing that, is that when I was 14, 16, in those age groups for youth, we regularly went to other churches, and they would tell us about us, and they would come to our church and tell us about them. So there was a built-in affirmation of learning and expectation when you're the minority in the community. And so the question continues, how do you amplify what you're doing so that it moves beyond the existing groups?
Thank you. Let me invite the panelists to respond to those and any final comments as we wrap up.
There's a book that I read some time ago. A rabbi speaks with Jesus. And I got acquainted with the book by reading another book written by Pope Benedict, which is a 3-volume meditation on Jesus. So I'm reading Pope Benedict's book, and I'm very excited about it. I share that news with some of my Catholic friends, and they say, well, you know, Mark, we don't really like that Pope. Right? I really appreciated him and this meditation. And he recommends reading this book, A Rabbi Speaks with Jesus, and Rabbi Neusner. And I speak to some my Jewish friends, and they say, Mark, we don't really like that rabbi, right? Right. But the meditation in A Rabbi Speaks with Jesus it was very powerful to me. He imagines himself being with Jesus through the Gospel of Matthew. And he's listening to Jesus. He's like, Rabbi, yeah, that's great. I agree with that. And they come to a point at the end of the gospel, and Jesus says something, and the rabbi's like, nah, can't do that. Checking out. And what I took away from that, and I think the point that both the rabbi and the Pope were making, it goes to this, the bridge building notion, right? That if you have the dialogue, the outcome isn't that I change and become like you, or you change and become like me, but that I actually go deeper in what I believe. I actually believe what I believe even more, and I'm also just as deeply committed to sustaining this conversation with you because you helped me go deeper in my own belief. So that kind of that tension and the conflict is what helps. The expansion comes from, it goes back to the same idea of friendship. And so thanks for the compliment about Mark being a big deal in Boston. That's news to me, right? But when I run across people, coming off the pandemic, food insecurity was a major crisis. Now that with inflation, going to the grocery store is tough, right? So I'll come across people who are doing, the basic strategy is you're in touch with people who need food. We can give you some food to give to the people. And so when I see those folk, it just naturally, it just expands and grows, right? And on the amplification, when I was very intentional in including our partners with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on the email and saying, we're doing this together, right? I want to be transparent. I want to let you know who it is, right? This is what it is. And if you want to work with it, then let's go. If not, then that's cool, right? So I wanted to be very, but we're working in Boston, Massachusetts, which I love, right? I mean, I love being in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm like, people might not like this partnership, right? Neither one of us, right? So, but I want to be very intentional about putting that out right up front. And people were like, let's go, right? There was and so I think that you can amplify. And there's more work for me to do in this area even by being very honest and transparent about where you're at and that you're actually trying to deepen where you're at even as you're reaching out.
Just one area, and I'll be quick, is that I think the first or second response when you sent that email out, it was a group of, I guess it's an organization that helps with inmates released from jail. Yeah, and they were like, okay, we're in, but more so we're in because we want to help distribute the food as well. So that's when I said, yeah, Mark is a big deal. And the work, the grassroots work that you all have done at the Azusa Christian Community Church has been simply amazing. And that's trust. When people are responding like that, that's because there's been just impactful work, meaningful work that's done by this organization of why people are responding. And so we've just been so fortunate and lucky to be able to have this partnership.
Robert, Alex, anything in conclusion?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me. I feel privileged to be up here with you two and Rob. Definitely fun for me to be here. For me, I don't know, I'm more of a simple guy, and I know doing good often takes work, and sometimes it happens because we keep our eyes and our hearts and our ears open, and that's more the path I lead. And I just feel that those of us who feel an obligation to spread our wings and share our communities and be collaborative with other faith communities, it's hard, but it's easy at the same time. And growing up here with my roots being as deep as they are, maybe it comes a little easier to me here than because of that. And sir, to your question, something you said in your question made me think of my early experience with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is that I was one of the token non-Mormons who played ward basketball as a teenager at Parley's Third Ward way back in the day. So I think that's what set me on this path.
And Alex is a legend in the Parley's Third Ward, I'm sure.
Right.
Ellie, to your question about broadening, we gave a specific example of a dialogue group with Latter-day Saints and Jews. We also have a Latter-day Saint Muslim group this beginning here. So there's different ways to approach it. Certainly your work with the Salt Lake Interfaith Roundtable is a way to broaden that out as well. And so we continue to look for ways to do it. I think, and to your question to my fellow Oregonian, I'll just sum up, and I could probably quote it because I love what President Nelson said a few years ago, but I'm just going to read it to make sure I get it completely right. And this would be the summary, I think, for this whole thing. And it's really just to start. It's just to start, and it comes down to you. We are all connected, he says, and we have a God-given responsibility to help make life better for those around us. We don't have to be alike or look alike to have love for one another. We don't even have to agree with each other to love each other. If we have any hope of reclaiming the goodwill and sense of humanity for which we yearn, it must begin with each of us, one person at a time.
There you go.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their experiences, for the work they're doing. Thank you.